Hi everyone, I'm Ryan Davidson, Ron Paul supporter and one of the most successful grassroots organizers for Ron Paul here in the state of Idaho. And I'm making this short video to explain how the delegate selection process works in the state of Idaho. If you've been paying attention to the strategy of Dr. Paul's campaign, you know that he is focusing on winning delegates as much as he is on winning elections. And why? Well, it's the delegates who are the people who are going to travel to the Republican National Convention in Florida, and they're going to be the ones who vote on which presidential candidate will be the nominee of the Republican Party. So delegate selection is very important, and it's very important that Ron Paul supporters understand how that process works in Idaho. The rules for delegate selection are different in every state, and they're always complicated. Idaho is no exception. So with this quick video, we will give you an overview of how the process works and how we can win delegates for Ron Paul in the state of Idaho. So as you can see on the whiteboard behind me, we have four separate political events that will happen in the state of Idaho, and each one of these events plays a part in the delegate selection process here in the state of Idaho. So let's review those really quickly. First, we have the county caucuses, which are taking place on March 6th. Then we have the state primary, which takes place on May 15th. Then we have the county and district conventions, which happen in May and June. And then finally, the Idaho State Convention happening June 22nd, which will take place in Twin Falls, Idaho. Again, these are four separate events. Each one plays a little bit of a role in the delegate selection process. So let's go over each one of these and how they apply and what we can do to maximize our potential in each of these events. So, firstly, starting off with the county caucuses. This is the brand new caucus that we are having in Idaho. Now, if you are a political junkie, you know that in the past, Idaho has always had a presidential primary in May. Well, just this year, the party voted to change to this caucus system on March 6th. The way the caucus system works is that there will be one caucus in each of Idaho's 44 counties. And that's where all Ron Paul supporters need to go and vote for Ron Paul on March 6th. Find out where your county caucus is. In Ada County, it'll be at the Taco Bell Arena. In Canyon County, it'll be at the Idaho Center. But please find out where your local county caucus is going to be. Some counties will even have multiple locations, so you have to pay real close attention. So as far as delegate selection goes, the first step in the process is that, well, first of all, Idaho is allowed 32 delegates to the National Convention. So each presidential candidate will submit a list of 32 proposed delegates to the state party. So if you would like to be a delegate to the National Convention, well, first it would help if you have the finances, because it's not going to be cheap. The National Convention goes over 3 days. It's in Florida. You need to pay for your own hotel, your own transportation. So if you feel that you would like to be a national delegate, you need to contact the national campaign in Idaho and say, can I be a potential delegate to the National Convention? So, Ron Paul will submit a list of 32 names to the state Republican Party. 32 names of delegates, 32 names of alternates. Now, how many of those delegates that he's actually entitled to is dependent on the results of the caucus. So, on March 6th, we will caucus in the state of Idaho in the 44 counties, and if Ron Paul wins 50% of those caucuses statewide, he's entitled to all 32 delegates. But if no candidate gets 50%, those delegates are going to be awarded proportionally. So Ron Paul might get 5, 6, 7, 10 delegates, depending on how the votes break down. If you have a four-way tie between Romney, Gingrich, Santorum, and Paul, each of those candidates will get 1/4 of the delegates. Okay, so that is stage one in the delegate selection process, being successful at the county caucuses. The next step is the state primary. And the state primary is the primary that we're all used to, where we elect governors and senators and legislators and all that, everything except the presidential election this year. But that's happening on May 15th. Now, the next step is that every Ron Paul supporter needs to run for a position called Precinct Committeeman. And it's a very simple process. It's filling out this one-page declaration of candidacy and filing it with your county clerk. Now, if you file this document, you will be listed on the ballot as a precinct committeeman for your voting precinct, and you'll be voted on at the May primary. Now, Ada County, for instance, has 145 precincts, and each one of those will elect a precinct committeeman. If Ron Paul supporters are a majority of those precinct committeemen, they can vote for new party leadership. And that happens at the county and district conventions, which happen in late May and early June. Now, Idaho has 44 counties, 35 legislative districts. Each one of those will have a convention. They're generally known as reorganization meetings, but we'll use the word convention for ease of reference. So, the newly elected precinct committeemen gather at the county and district conventions, and they vote for delegates to the state convention. Each legislative district elects 3 delegates, and each county elects a certain number of districts based on their size. So, for instance, Ada County might be electing over 100 delegates. That's a very big number. So, once the precinct committeemen assemble at these county and legislative district conventions, it's your job as Ron Paul supporters to vote for delegates to the state convention. Well, if you're a precinct committeeman, you can also be a delegate. We need to recruit as many people as possible who support Ron Paul, who are willing to go to the state convention in Twin Falls to run for delegates at the county and district conventions. So, along with electing delegates, these meetings are very important because they elect the leadership of the Republican Party of Idaho, and we need Ron Paul supporters to run for county chairman, district chairman, to push the party in a more constitutional direction, which we've been doing in the last few years. Okay, so once you have your delegates to the Idaho State Convention, which is taking place on June 22nd. Well, the question is, well, what do these delegates to the state convention have to do with the national delegates who are already pre-selected by the county caucus results? It's a good question. The party rules say that whoever wins the caucus is entitled to delegates. However, it's the job of the state delegates to essentially ratify those national delegates. So, when you get to the state convention, there will be a list of delegates, national delegates for Ron Paul, that have to be ratified or voted on by the delegates to the state convention. Now, even though party rules say that Ron Paul might be entitled to delegates, if we don't have anyone at the state convention to vote for those delegates, to ratify them, he won't get them. In fact, this happened to Pat Buchanan several years ago when he was running for president. He was entitled to a certain number of delegates. However, no one showed up at the state convention to ratify them, and the party just broke the rules and said, we are awarding your delegates to someone else. So we cannot allow that to happen. So essentially, it's the function of the delegates to the state convention to protect the national delegates that are chosen at the county caucus. But there's a very interesting twist to this, because essentially all power in the party emanates from the state convention. And if Ron Paulers make up 2/3 of the delegates to the state convention, they can actually suspend the rules and give the delegates to whoever they want. So let's say Ron Paul does not win the county caucuses and gets less than 50% and is entitled to 0 delegates. Well, if 2/3 of the delegates to the Idaho State Convention are Ron Paul supporters, they can vote to suspend the rules, overturn the results of the caucus, and award all of the national delegates to Ron Paul. So it's very important to have a good presence at the Idaho State Convention, because that's where we can make our attempt to either protect our delegates or overturn the results of the caucus if need be. And of course, obviously Mitt Romney supporters can attempt to do the same thing. So we cannot let Mitt Romney supporters have 2/3 of the delegates, because they will take away any of the delegates that Ron Paul would be entitled to. So, once again, it's very important to participate in your county caucus, vote for Ron Paul on March 6th, then file your declaration of candidacy for precinct committeeman, and file that with your county clerk. Run for precinct committeeman at the primary, get elected, vote for delegates at the county conventions and district conventions, and then attend the Idaho State Convention to support Ron Paul. So in a nutshell, that's the basic of the delegate selection process in Idaho. I hope you enjoyed this little presentation, and hey, now that you know what to do, let's get to work.